The hotel lobby buzzed with its usual rhythm, the soft clink of glasses from the cafe mixing with the distant hum of conversation. Emma maneuvered her cleaning cart along the polished marble floor, her gloves slightly damp from the morning disinfecting. She had worked in this five-star hotel for nearly 3 years, and though the uniform was itchy and the hours long, she found a quiet satisfaction in her work. Everything had its place, every surface polished, every linen crisp. It was her small kingdom of order in a chaotic world. She paused by the elevator to tidy up a smudge on the brass panel, when the phone at the reception desk rang sharply. The receptionist was busy attending to a check-in, so the call went unanswered. Instinctively, Emma stepped forward. Her high school had offered Dutch as an elective, and while she wasn't fluent, she could manage a conversation. Picking up the receiver, she greeted, "Godemiddag, hoe kan ik u helpen?" The receptionist glanced at her in surprise, but Emma smiled faintly, her eyes never leaving the screen. The voice on the other end sounded tense, foreign, urgent. Emma listened carefully, replying with a mixture of practiced courtesy and her limited Dutch vocabulary. Ja, dat klopt. Nee, dat is niet nodig, dank u wel. She hung up and returned the phone to its cradle, her hands trembling just slightly. It had been an odd call, one she didn't fully understand, yet she felt a strange satisfaction at having managed it. From across the lobby, a man in a sharply tailored suit had been watching. He leaned casually against the marble railing, though there was an intensity to his gaze. His dark hair was perfectly combed, and his eyes held a quiet power, the kind of presence that made people instinctively straighten their posture. He was clearly accustomed to commanding attention, yet now he seemed almost curious. Emma felt a prick of unease under his stare, but she forced herself to continue her work, pretending not to notice. By the time she finished wiping down the reception area, he had approached, his steps silent but confident. "Excuse me," he said in perfectly measured English, his accent crisp and refined. "I couldn't help but notice, you spoke Dutch just now. May I ask how proficient you are?" Emma blinked, unsure whether to feel flattered or intimidated. She had never expected anyone to notice her small skill. I studied it in school," she admitted quietly. "Not fluent, but I can manage conversations." Her voice carried the faintest trace of nervousness. He smiled, a slow, enigmatic smile that made her stomach twist in unexpected ways. "I see. That was impressive, nonetheless." He held out a card, black and matte, catching the light in the lobby's crystal chandeliers. "My name is Adrian Voss. I travel extensively, and occasionally I encounter situations where knowing another language, any language, proves invaluable. I would like to offer you an opportunity, if you're willing to accept it." Emma stared at the card. She recognized the name immediately. Adrian Voss wasn't just any traveler. He was a billionaire known for his investment empire, his appearances at global summits, and his near-mythical lifestyle. To be noticed by someone like him felt surreal, almost cinematic. She opened her mouth to decline, to say she was just a hotel cleaner, that she couldn't possibly be of use to someone like him. But something in his expression, part curiosity, part determination, made her pause. "What kind of opportunity?" she asked cautiously, her fingers curling around the edge of the card. "Meet me tomorrow," he said simply, his eyes unwavering. "At 11 a.m., in the lounge on the 35th floor. Dress comfortably. That's all I can say for now." With that, he turned, leaving her standing in the lobby, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might echo through the marble halls. The night that followed was a restless blur. Emma barely slept, her mind replaying the brief encounter, wondering if it had all been a coincidence. Perhaps he had mistaken her for someone else. Perhaps he simply admired the way she had handled a phone call in a language she barely mastered. Still, a flicker of excitement stirred within her, a rare sense of possibility that made her chest tighten with nervous anticipation. By the next morning, she dressed carefully in a simple, elegant outfit, dark slacks, a crisp white blouse, and her hair pulled neatly into a bun. She arrived at the hotel early, her cleaning duties completed hours before. The elevator ride to the 35th floor felt interminable, her reflection in the mirrored walls showing a woman who was both anxious and exhilarated. The lounge was quiet, luxurious in a minimalist way. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below, the streets like veins of light in the early morning sun. Adrian was already there, seated at a small table with 2 espresso cups and a leather-bound notebook. He stood as she approached, his presence filling the space effortlessly. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice smooth and commanding yet warm. "Please, sit." Emma hesitated for a moment before taking the seat opposite him. He studied her carefully, as if measuring her, yet there was no judgment in his eyes. "I have a proposition," he began. "I am about to embark on a series of projects across Europe and Asia, projects that require discretion, intelligence, and adaptability. I often encounter situations where communication is key, and where ordinary employees cannot meet the demands of the task. I believe you have potential in this regard." Emma blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. You want me to work for you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "In a manner of speaking," he replied. "I am offering a chance to join me temporarily. It is not a traditional job. There will be challenges, and the environments can be unpredictable. I will train you, prepare you. But I need someone who can think on their feet, who can handle unexpected circumstances without panic." Her mind raced. 1,000 doubts, fears, and dreams collided. She was a hotel cleaner, not an executive assistant or a translator. Yet the allure of stepping into a world entirely unlike her own was intoxicating. I don't know if I can," she admitted. "Can you try?" he asked, his gaze softening just enough to hint at encouragement. "I do not ask for perfection. I ask for courage and willingness to learn." Something inside her shifted. She realized this wasn't just about the money or the prestige. It was about stepping into a life she had only dared to imagine in fleeting daydreams. "Yes," she said finally, her voice firmer than she expected. "I'll try." Adrian smiled, the enigmatic expression softening into something almost human. "Good. We leave in 3 days. In the meantime, I will provide you with some materials, basic language exercises, cultural notes, and instructions. Study them. You will need them more than you think." The next 3 days were a whirlwind. Emma studied phrases in Dutch, brushed up on French and Italian for quick conversational purposes, and learned basic codes and etiquette for high-level meetings. Each evening, she returned to her small apartment exhausted but exhilarated, the thought of the journey ahead both terrifying and thrilling. She was no longer just a hotel cleaner, she was preparing to step into a world most people only glimpsed on screens or in magazines. On the day of departure, she arrived at the hotel with her small suitcase. Adrian waited in the lobby, a private car, idling outside. As she approached, he handed her a folder containing tickets, itineraries, and her first assignment, a high-stakes negotiation in Amsterdam, involving international investors and delicate language barriers. Emma's pulse quickened. "You will be under my direct supervision," Adrian said as they entered the car. "Observe, assist where necessary, and remember, nothing is more important than discretion." The drive to the airport was filled with a comfortable silence, broken only by occasional instructions or clarifications. By the time they landed in Amsterdam, Emma was alert, nervous, and utterly aware of how far from her old life she had traveled. The city sprawled before her, canals winding like silver threads under the morning sun. Adrian guided her to a sleek hotel where the meeting would take place. Inside the meeting room, the air was thick with tension. Men and women in tailored suits spoke rapidly, and Adrian leaned toward her. "You will translate, help bridge communication gaps. Stay calm. Listen carefully. Only speak when necessary." Emma nodded, swallowing her fear. She repeated mentally the phrases she had practiced, the words flowing slowly at first, then with increasing confidence. Her contributions, small but precise, drew subtle nods of approval from Adrian and, unexpectedly, from several of the investors. Each successful sentence bolstered her confidence. She realized that her ordinary life had prepared her in unexpected ways, her attention to detail, her calm under pressure, her capacity to observe and adapt. By the end of the day, the meeting concluded successfully. Adrian clapped her on the shoulder, a gesture of rare warmth, and whispered, "You did well. Better than I expected." Emma felt a thrill of pride, but also an unexpected emotion, belonging. For the first time, she realized she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. The day had changed her, and she knew it was only the beginning. As they returned to the hotel, Adrian handed her an envelope. "For your efforts," he said. Inside was a substantial sum, far more than she had ever earned as a cleaner. Yet she was not focused on the money. She was focused on the doors that had opened, the respect she had earned, and the realization that the world was far bigger than she had ever believed. That night, lying in her hotel room bed, Emma reflected on the past week. A simple act, answering a phone call in Dutch, had changed everything. The thought was almost absurd, but it was true. She was no longer invisible, no longer confined to the margins. Adrian's confidence in her had unlocked a courage she didn't know she possessed. In the following weeks, Emma continued to travel with Adrian, each assignment more challenging than the last. She encountered cultures, languages, and situations that tested every skill she had, yet she thrived. She became adept at reading people, negotiating delicately, and thinking on her feet. And through it all, Adrian watched her progress with a quiet pride, occasionally offering advice, rarely praising, always challenging. In moments of quiet between assignments, they would sit together over coffee, sometimes speaking in Dutch, sometimes in English, sharing thoughts on the day's events. Emma found herself enjoying his company, not just for his wealth or power, but for his intellect, his observation, his subtle humor. And though she would never admit it aloud, she felt a bond forming, one forged not through wealth or status, but through shared challenge and mutual respect. The journey that began with a single phone call had transformed her life. Emma no longer saw herself as a hotel cleaner, a woman confined to routines and limits. She saw herself as capable, resourceful, and resilient. And she knew, deep in her heart, that this was just the beginning of a life she could never have imagined. And yet, somehow, it was exactly the life she had been waiting for.